Today we explore the beautiful town of Vega Baja, Puerto Rico, in the north-central region of the island. And when I say beautiful, it's not just because of its beaches, its countryside, or because it's Bad Bunny's hometown, but because there's no better way to describe it. This town is nice. The place is clean, well-preserved, with no graffiti or urban blight, and chock full of friendly people eager to show you what the town has to offer. Like I said before, Vega Baja is also the hometown of Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, better known in the musical world as Bad Bunny. In fact, this video was originally going to be titled Vega Baja, Puerto Rico, Beaches, Music, Sugarcane, and the Birthplace of Bad Bunny. You know, the whole clickbait thing? But during the research phase, I discovered that Benito was actually born in the neighboring town of Bayamón and grew up in Vega Baja. I guess we all have to be born somewhere. In any case, this video is actually not about Bad Bunny at all, or do I seek to have it perceived that way. It's just that the man is certainly the most prominent musical figure, probably of all time, to emerge from Vega Baja, and it would be remiss not to mention him. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the best attractions Vega Baja has to offer, including its Santa María del Rosario Parish, City Hall, the José Francisco Nater Main Square, the beautifully restored Art Deco Teatro América, the wonderful Casa Portela Museum, the municipal market and parking structure, and the Trío Vegabajeño Monument. Then we'll venture to the outskirts of town to see the original Vega Baja train station, visit Puerto Nuevo Beach, the only blue flag beach left in Puerto Rico, the Cibuco coastline, beautiful, wild, and dangerous, the Tortuguero Lagoon and Wildlife Reserve, which is close to the public and home to hundreds of alligators, and to top it all off, we'll drive all the way to Almirante Sur ward to see firsthand the place where Bad Bunny spent his childhood years. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Getting to Vega Baja is easy. Yeah, I know. I say that in every video. But really, in the case of Vega Baja, it is. If you're coming from the Isla Verde, Condado, or Old San Juan area, just take the Minillas Tunnel and a small section of PR 22 until you get to the point where it splits into PR 18 to the left and PR 22 to the right. Continue on PR 22 going west until you reach exit 38. Just so you know, the road is marked in Spanish, so the sign will actually say Salida 38. Turn left at the end of the exit, follow the service road, also known as Calle Venezuela, turn right at the next corner, named after the world-famous Trío Vegabajeño, follow it until you reach the intersection with PR 155, turn left, and follow the road straight to the center of town. The entire trip should take a little under an hour. When we reached the center of town, we parked right in front of the southern entrance to Iglesia Santa María del Rosario. That would be Santa María del Rosario Church in the King's English. Not being a Catholic myself, I was curious why this was referred to as a church and not a parish. After all, I visited dozens of churches in Puerto Rico while producing this series, and frankly, many of them seem to be pretty much the same to me. So, I did what any 21st century person would do. I Googled it. Well, as it turns out, the church is the building. The parish is the group of people that follow the parishioner or priest. So now I know. In any case, the temple is beautiful. And yes, the altar does point east like it's supposed to. Well, sort of. More like southeast. The structure is painted in pastel green with white trim on the outside, with pastel blue and white trim on the inside. The original church was demolished in 1860. The new church, the one we actually visited, was built in stages between 1850 and 1874. It was consecrated in 1860 and officially inaugurated on March 12, 1870. The original tower had a clock that was badly damaged during the Aguadilla earthquake of 1918 and finally destroyed by Hurricane San Felipe in 1928. The building was included in the U.S. National Register of Historic Places on September 18, 1984, and designated as part of the historic zone of Vega Baja in 2004. From the air, you can see that the temple follows a cross-shaped pattern with barrel-vaulted domes at the center and foot of the cross. This style was very popular in Italy during the Renaissance period. On the inside, it has just the right amount of stained glass windows and religious art to make it solemn and beautiful. Another interesting fact is that the temple has remained basically unaltered for over 150 years, with the exception of the addition of the parish house on the north side. However, it was restored in 1979 to maintain it in tip-top condition. As you leave the temple through the main entrance, you're met with a cast iron gate leading to the José Francisco Nater main square. I couldn't find too much information about Nater, but according to Ancestry.com, he was a pharmacist who was listed as mayor of Vega Baja in the 1910 U.S. Census. The square is large and clean, with plenty of trees and benches for people watching. However, you can tell that recent hurricanes like Irma and María did take a toll on the trees, and they had to be pruned back in order to save them. Thankfully, they're coming back, and the place is nice and welcoming. And here's a piece of trivia for you. Did you know that during Vega Baja's early years, back in the late 1770s, there were people actually buried at this place? That's right! While researching this town, I ran into a 1957 publication by Vega Baja photographer Jimmy Rosario documenting the fact. As it turns out, when Vega Baja was founded back in 1776, the Spanish government ordered the construction of the original church and city hall buildings across from each other like they remain today. The land in the middle remained barren for many years, and during that period, people were actually buried there. I couldn't find the date when the actual square was built. Across the square from Santa María del Rosario Church, you have the City Hall building, which according to a couple of employees that we met there is still under repair from the damages sustained during Hurricanes Irma and María. Although these fellows weren't tourism employees, they did tell us enough about Vega Baja to point us in the right direction. From City Hall, we walked a few steps east to the Teatro América, an Art Deco theater constructed in 1942 in the midst of World War II and restored in 2002. The theater holds up to 500 patrons and serves as a gathering place for plays, graduations, and all sorts of cultural and civic events. On the second floor, there's a cafe lounge that's perfect for civic and professional gatherings. To this date, Teatro América is still the epicenter of art and culture in Vega Baja. Another theater that we actually didn't get to see was the Cine Teatro Fénix on the north side of City Hall. Constructed in 1917 and renovated in 2019, Cine Teatro Fénix has hosted plays, silent films, movies, and historical events. It even projected propaganda films during both World Wars. One interesting fact is that it was inspired by the famous Alejandro Tapia y Rivera Theater in Old San Juan. Another is that to this date, it still hosts matinees. Amazing! A little further east, on José Julián Acosta Street, we visited the Casa Portela Museum. The Portelas were a well-to-do family in the Vega Baja township. They owned a huge house that spanned between José Julián Acosta Street and PR 155, the road we used to arrive in Vega Baja. So basically, the house was about as wide as José Francisco Nater Square. Of course, the Portela residence was built during a different time. According to the museum attendant, townspeople would walk across the house to go from one street to the other. If there was coffee brewing, they'd be offered some. Very different from nowadays. Instead of destroying the original residence, the museum was built around it. Hence, there are parts of the original structure everywhere you look. Exhibits include the Vega Baja Sports Hall of Fame, honoring the town's legendary athletes, the Jorge Otero Barreto Military Hall, honoring the most decorated soldier in Puerto Rican history, and the Vega Baja Panoramic Hall, covering the town's evolution from its native Taino inhabitants to a modern-day metropolis. As we left the Casa Portela Museum, there was one more place that we wanted to see before exploring the outskirts of town. It was the Héctor Joy Sandín Marketplace, a couple of blocks west on PR 155. Inaugurated in 1992, it's a 4-story structure with a parking garage, public car terminal, and 51 vendor stalls for small businesses, artisans, and food vendors. My wife and I had a couple of papas rellenas, that would be stuffed potatoes in the King's English, that were simply to die for. It was time to visit the outskirts of Vega Baja, and we set our sights on the old train station for starters. Did you know that when the U.S. arrived in Puerto Rico back in 1898, the island had a railway system with 32 stations that went around the island from San Juan to Ponce along the north, west, and south coasts? It operated between 1891 and 1921. And why did it disappear, you might ask? Well, I can only speculate, but Americans sold cars. Cars need parts and roads. So you do the math. Today, there are those that speak about the island's automotive industry, when what we have, in fact, is an automotive market. Ironically, the island also has an urban train service that's only 10.7 miles long, has 17 stations, runs empty most of the time, and costs $2 billion to build. Did anyone make a quick buck there? I don't know. The Municipio did a great job restoring the Vega Baja train station. It doesn't look a day older than the day the last train went by. However, today it's a museum that covers Puerto Rico's efforts to have a great railway system way before we became American citizens. It was time to do something fun. Enough with museums. So we headed for Puerto Nuevo Beach. Many people ask why this beach is called Puerto Nuevo. After all, Puerto Nuevo is also the name of an entire area in the San Juan Metroplex and the place where we have our commercial docks. Well, as it turns out, this wonderful beach also sits within an area called Puerto Nuevo. Puerto Nuevo Ward, that is. The municipal government of Vega Baja has done a great job with this beach. So much so that it's the only beach in Puerto Rico to be designated a blue flag beach. Back in 2014, when I wrote the first edition of my book Puerto Rico Beach by Beach, Puerto Nuevo was a mess. Now, just 11 years later, it's Puerto Rico's best kept beach. I've always said that there are things in life that God just puts in your lap, and others that you have to work for. In that sense, Luquillo Beach is the best beach in the larger island of Puerto Rico. But only because God made it that way. However, when it comes to upkeep, care, facilities, and services, Puerto Nuevo Beach in the small town of Vega Baja ranks number 1 any day of the week. And by the way, I don't know who the mayor of Vega Baja is or what political party he belongs to, and frankly, I don't care. But him and his team have done a great job at Puerto Nuevo and throughout the municipality of Vega Baja as a whole. That's just my humble opinion. So what are blue flag beaches anyway? They are beaches that have been awarded the blue flag designation. an international eco-label recognizing beaches that meet high standards of environmental management, water quality, safety, and education. There was a time when Puerto Rico had 7 blue flag beaches, but as of today, it only has 1. For more information about the Blue Flag program, visit the address on screen. A little to the east of Puerto Nuevo Beach, there's another beach that's both stunning and deadly. It's called Punta Cibuco Beach, and it's a landscape photographer's paradise. I've made many of my nicest seascape photos at Punta Cibuco. However, you'll notice that there's no one in the water. That's because this beach is as dangerous as they come. For starters, it's rocky, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are also sea urchins, underwater currents, and riptides. So if photography is your thing, particularly landscape or seascape photography, you'll feel like a kid in a candy store. There was one more water feature that I wanted to show you before leaving coastal Vega Baja. It's called the Tortuguero Lagoon, and it sits southwest of Puerto Nuevo Beach, over the county line between Vega Baja and the neighboring town of Manatí. However, I can only show it to you from the air. Why? Because it's closed to the public. And why would it be closed, you might ask? Well, alligators could be an excellent reason. You see, Puerto Ricans have been quite stupid taking care of the island. And I'm a Puerto Rican, so this is something that I've witnessed. During the last 50 years, unscrupulous parties have smuggled all sorts of exotic animals into the island, including boa constrictors, reticulated pythons, ball pythons, caimans, rhesus macaque monkeys, mongooses, large green iguanas, and even piranhas. And believe me, I've seen this with my own 2 eyes. In fact, when I was a kid, back in the 60s, one of my neighbors had piranhas in a fish tank, and he actually fed them chicken drumsticks. Back then, nobody realized the problem this would cause. After all, they were sold at pet shops. Thank God piranhas didn't seem to adapt to the island. Otherwise, our rivers would be full of them. But the rest of the predators mentioned are actually thriving. In any case, Tortuguero Lagoon is a beautiful place that's best enjoyed from a distance. From Tortuguero Lagoon, we drove across town to a beautiful park built to honor one of Vega Baja's most amazing musical groups. I'm talking, of course, about the world-famous Trío Vegabajeño. Back in the 40s and 50s, way before the Beatles and Elvis, Mexico had Los Panchos and Puerto Rico had El Trío Vegabajeño. It was the singing guitar trio era, and Puerto Rico's national trio was El Trío Vegabajeño. They formed in 1943 at the Tortuguero military camp of Vega Baja, back when the recording medium of choice were 78 RPM records. So I'm not sure how many recordings they made. What I can tell you is that I counted over 15 covers back at the Casa Portela museum. Leaving the Trío Vegabajeño Monument, there was one last place that we wanted to visit. It was Almirante Sur, the ward or barrio where Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, also known as Bad Bunny, grew up. There have been many things said about Bad Bunny, and I'm not going to regurgitate what has already been beaten to death in the media. I'm just going to give you my 2 cents. I consider myself a pretty good judge of character. Many people strike it big and forget about their roots. But not this guy. His mother raised him in church from a young age, and it certainly shows all around. He has what Puerto Ricans call vergüenza. Vergüenza is one of those terms that are impossible to translate. It means being a good person down to the bone. It also means having respect for other people. It has to do with honesty and hard work. It also includes loyalty and a sense of responsibility. And mind you, I've never met the guy or listened to a single one of his songs. I'm more of a Beatles guy. Thank you very much. But every time that I've seen Benito, he projects this sense of serenity, of kindness, and of commitment to his native Puerto Rican brothers and sisters that you hardly see in other artists. I mean, Even the Beatles never spoke of Liverpool like Benito honors Puerto Rico. So my wife and I drove all the way to where he spent his childhood years. It's a ward like hundreds of others in Puerto Rico where people live with the basics and friendships last a lifetime. And as you can see, this time I'm not including the coordinates to respect the privacy of this small community. From Barrio Almirante Sur, it was getting late, so we decided to drive back to San Juan. And talking about San Juan, if you're planning to visit the old city, save yourself the hassle of traditional city tours. They're expensive and you'll be herded along with people that won't necessarily share your interests. Instead, order the Old San Juan Walking Tour. It's packed with useful information about all the main attractions, as well as every GPS coordinate and 2 hours of exclusive online video. That way, you'll be able to visit before you visit and hit the ground running when you arrive in the old city. See you next time.